Thursday, almost done with the week. It's Bishop on Air, but soon the live program going to be exclusively with America's Talking Network. So I need you to head over to America's Talking Network on YouTube and like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because a date certain here soon, we will be broadcasting this live program, a review of what's going on in Illinois at America's Talking Network with Illinois in Focus Daily. A daily digest for you to get in, get out, and know what's going on in Illinois. So, of course, I do a lot of coverage of what's happening at the Illinois State House. When they're in session, we're on the ground making things happen, watching and delivering news for you across the state about what's going on here in Springfield. So valuable information, timely, accurate, and consistent. Go to thecentersquare.com. But of course, Illinois in Focus Daily will take a lot of that reporting and bring it to you on a daily basis. So a date certain here with Bishop on Air, the live program each and every weekday morning is going to Illinois in Focus Daily at America's Talking Network on YouTube. So again, you guys have we've seen like 300 plus subscriptions just in the past few days since I've announced this. Go to America's Talking Network, get those subscriptions up, and we will continue to give you that live coverage each and every weekday morning. Bishop on Air will still be here. All right, so we're going to do, maybe some live streams on the weekends, hang out a bit. Maybe I do some short documentaries from things across the state. Maybe I do a Today in Gun Control segment throughout the week. So you'll still get Bishop on Air from time to time, but that daily program, I want to emphasize, will be on America's Talking Network. So very excited for that. So we're going to get right on into it here. So head over to America's Talking Network and subscribe there, because a date certain, again, not sure when exactly that's going to be quite yet, but we are going to be exclusively broadcasting the live daily program with the Illinois in Focus Daily at America's Talking Network. So make it happen, all right? Bishop on Air, follow me anywhere, just search Bishop on Air. Supreme Court narrowing the definition of what bribery is, and that could impact the landmark case against Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan, who is the longest-serving House Speaker in State House history, and was also the chairman of the Democratic Party of Illinois, a nexus of power that gave him huge amount of control over politics in Illinois. But what happened in the U.S. Supreme Court yesterday with a majority opinion narrowing what the definition of bribery is, expected to impact not just Madigan's case, which is coming up in October, but also the ComEd 4 that were found guilty last year in what federal prosecutors called Madigan Enterprise. Welcome in. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Find us at America's Talking Network on YouTube for the daily program, giving you a daily digest of what's going on in and around Illinois. Greatly appreciate you being here. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. So here's the headline you'll find at thecentersquare.com. Snyder case at the U.S. Supreme Court. SCOTUS narrowing that federal bribery definition. So this was something we were anticipating. We knew this was coming because the case against former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan, well, he was charged in 2022. This is after his name was connected with what federal prosecutors said was a nearly decade-long bribery scheme of Madigan working through associates to get no-show jobs and contracts for his associates in exchange for favorable legislation of ComEd. And that is, of course, the allegation. You got the ComEd 4, which was former ComEd CEO. You had several lobbyists with ComEd and an associate of Madigan being charged and found guilty on that. We'll talk about that and the impacts of this case out of the U.S. Supreme Court, what it could mean for that case. But also, Madigan, later, he was charged with 22 counts of corruption, racketeering, using his official office to better himself and his associates. So that case was actually supposed to go to trial in April. Didn't happen because there was another case that the U.S. Supreme Court was taking up out of Indiana called Snyder v. USA. And here is what the headline is, of course, from yesterday out of the U.S. Supreme Court. They narrow federal bribery statute in Snyder case. Our colleague Brett Rowland at the Center Square writing this, saying the U.S. Supreme Court narrowed the federal bribery statute in a 6-3 decision Wednesday that could affect how prosecutors across the country pursue public corruption cases. Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote the opinion for the majority. The nation's highest court had been asked to decide if the federal bribery statute makes it a crime for public officials to accept gratuities, payments, or rewards made after an official act. The majority said no. So here's a quote from the majority opinion. State and local governments often regulate the gifts the state and local governments may accept. The federal law does not supplement those state and local rules by subjecting 19 million state and local officials to up to 10 years in federal prison for accepting even commonplace gratuities. Rather, the federal law leaves it to the state and local governments to regulate gratuities to state and local officials. So you can read on. The decision has the potential to upend several high-profile corruption cases in Illinois, including the 2023 conviction of the ComEd 4 and the upcoming case against former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan. Judges paused those cases while they waited for that Supreme Court decision. Well, I connected with St. Xavier University professor David Parker, who specializes in understanding corruption, especially white-collar type crimes and government corruption. I've chatted with him about the Madigan case for years now. And here's some of his reaction to the U.S. Supreme Court's decision yesterday to narrow the federal bribery statute.
The big thing about the bribery is the application, and a big phrase is, okay, is the mens rea, the guilty mind. How are you going to look at corruptly? And it's really a gray term, very vague, and it could really open up a big can of worms with who to be found guilty under these statutes. I mean, you could be looking at 20 million public employees plus individuals working at private firms, companies, organizations that receive federal monies. So large reach. And so they wanted to look and say, are we really talking about bribery straight up versus a gratuity? So is it kind of a quid pro quo, something for something, or if it's just a matter of saying thank you? And they kind of came back and said, well, if it's merely just a thank you, a gratuity, it doesn't violate the law.
So Parker essentially clarifying that it's the after the fact that you have, where it's not, say somebody sets up and says, hey, so-and-so politician, I'll give you this if you give me that quid pro quo. He says, no, it seems the Supreme Court narrowed it down to that's the only way you can have a bribery if it's before the fact, not some kind of gratuity after the fact of an official action.
Right. In this case, yes, it was definitely after the fact because there really can't be a quid pro quo, something for something. So it just happens after the fact. It's more easily to say it was a gift. And I think the funny thing, you go back with the comment and everything else, is you've got to look at the mens rea of the individuals involved. So I received a gift after the fact, but then you have to look at the provider, giver, and say, is what was the intent of giving the gift? And so you have two different things. Mens rea is here. Is I'm giving you a gift. Hey, Greg, here, thank you for thank you. Or I might be thinking is if I give Greg this gift, then next time there will be kind of that quid pro quo.
So, again, narrowing that federal bribery statute and how it impacts cases like the case of former House Speaker Michael Madigan, charged with 22 counts in the ComEd saga. That obviously is a pretty wild case when you read the indictment, and you also look back at the ComEd 4 trial from last year where they were found guilty, and all of the evidence federal prosecutors had. Undercover wiretaps, undercover video conversations between individuals cooperating with federal prosecutors and the likes of the ComEd 4 people who were found guilty. How this Supreme Court ruling on narrowing the federal bribery statute will impact the ComEd 4 trial that already happened. We'll take a look at that. But obviously, how is this all going to impact the trial against former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan, who faces trial in October? I asked St. Xavier University professor David Parker that very question.
I don't know. I think Brett Rowland has done a great job, one of your colleagues and all, and there's a couple of articles on it. I mean, as he pointed out, 15 of 23 counts against Madigan wouldn't be affected by this. So the decision might be just to kind of forget about those extra counts, those 7, and try to avoid any type of appeal and move forward. So it was really, there was hesitancy, but it was really a really smart decision to wait. So ultimately, it can get him off the hook for some of the charges, but not all of them. So, I think it was wise to kind of wait and then maybe shut the door down to a possible future appeal based on the Snyder ruling.
So obviously the judges saw that the Snyder case was in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, and instead of going forward with the case in April, they decided to wait until October to have that case heard. So we'll be watching in that and obviously bring you all kinds of updates there. But what about the ComEd 4 trial? Because the defense attorney for Ann Pramaggiore, the former CEO of ComEd, who was found guilty with the ComEd 4, he told my colleague Brett Rowland that indeed there's likely going to be a retrial in this case because of the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling, getting reaction from David Parker on that very issue.
It's possible. You don't really know what's going to go on with juries. Again, is this like Madigan's defense? Their defense is this is just business as normal, politics as normal. And that's all it was. It was kind of like there were gratuities and all that, but it certainly wasn't, bribery. Again, one of the things that they did point out is this is federal law, and you still do have, say, the state statutes to look at. And we saw that with Trump in New York. So, but that being said, a retrial, I think, is you got to really go back and look at the charges against them and see what evidence there was to establish a mens rea.
A lot more to come on this story, no doubt about it, especially with the trial in October of Madigan, but also what state elected officials are going to do about this, because the U.S. Supreme Court only focused on federal bribery law, not on state laws. So is there an opportunity for the legislature to beef up bribery allegations that can be leveled against legislators or local officials and mayors or whatnot who are alleged to have done some wrongdoing? Again, something we'll watch closely. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop with America's Talking Network and the Center Square. Greatly appreciate you guys being here each and every weekday morning. Carjackings have been up considerably across the country, but in Illinois, in particular Chicago, has been rather wild to see those numbers increased considerably. Welcome back. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell at America's Talking Network, and you'll be able to find this exclusively at a date certain only at America's Talking Network on YouTube. I, of course, focus on what's going on at the Illinois State House as associate editor for thecentersquare.com. So you can find regular reports from myself and my team at thecentersquare.com/Illinois. One of the stories you'll be able to find deals with this issue of carjackings and grant money that's being made available to law enforcement agencies across the state to handle carjackings and to possibly find some solutions and to address the criminality that there is. Illinois Secretary of State Alexi Giannoulias yesterday held a news conference announcing $11 million in grants for helping to fight the carjacking epidemic across the state. So here's some of the Secretary of State's laying out what exactly is the major issue impacting a lot more people than should be.
Far too many Illinoisans have had to face the shock of walking to an empty driveway or parking space on the street and seeing one of their most valuable possessions gone forever. For many of us, our vehicles serve as a lifeline. We depend on it for work, running errands, shuttling our kids around to practices and camps, and visiting loved ones. So to have it stolen can have terrible consequences for families and upend their lives. Unfortunately, the headlines tell the story. In recent years, an alarming number of Illinoisans have been impacted by vehicle thefts and carjackings. In 2022, the most recent vehicle theft data that we have, there were 38,649 thefts statewide.
It's quite a number, and when you look at just Chicago specifically, some of the statistics that Chicago police publish, you can see here that carjackings, in particular motor vehicle theft, maybe down 17% in the last 7 days, but over the past 4 years, it's gone up 165% in the last 3 years. 174% just in the last 2 years, 78%, and the numbers are rather large when you look at that specific category of crime. More from the Secretary of State on who's going to be tapping into these $11 million in grants from the Secretary of State's office.
The Illinois State Police, which will receive more than $675,000. The Chicago Police Department, which will get more than $1.4 million. The Tri-County Auto Theft Task Force, based in Joliet, which will receive $2.3 million. And the Illinois Statewide Auto Theft Task Force, which was approved for more than $3.3 million. Again, I want to thank the Council for their hard work in reviewing grant applications that will help increase manpower, tools, and strategies to combat carjacking and motor vehicle theft. We owe it to our public safety officers to make sure they have the technology, tools, and training they need to do their job safely and effectively. I have a few more parts of this speech, but I again want to thank the members of law enforcement that are here today.
So clearly a lot of dollars going out. We'll hear about where those dollars are actually coming from, and if this is the equivalent of what was sent out in this particular grant to help combat carjackings from last year. But more from law enforcement's take. Here is Illinois State Police Director Brendan Kelly talking about some of the statistics and also some of the tactics.
That's in addition to the 32% drop in statewide interstate shootings in 2023 over the previous year. We also saw a 27% increase in the recovery of stolen and hijacked vehicles statewide in 2023 compared to 2022. Using technologies such as LPRs, air operations, canines, and partnerships with other law enforcement agencies, the Expressway Safety Enforcement Group has provided a roadmap for statewide vehicular hijacking and other related violent crime initiatives.
So he mentions the license plate reader technology being utilized to help combat carjackings and car thefts. Well, that LPR system across the states being challenged in federal courts, something we'll be tracking for you with the Liberty Justice Center suing, calling it a dragnet, saying it's a violation of individuals' constitutional rights to essentially be monitored using these types of license plate reading cameras that can pretty much just pinpoint exactly where you're at all the time whenever you're driving around. So regardless, Illinois State Police Director Brendan Kelly talking about combating car thefts. But back to the Secretary of State, he was taking questions and acknowledged that the $11 million being let this year, smaller than the amounts from last year.
Yes, last year it was closer to $30 million. Is that correct? Closer to $30 million because there was a one-time transfer from the General Assembly due to the rise of carjackings. Again, the funding from this comes from a $1 per insurance policy that insurance companies get, and we collect for this initiative. The goal is to get closer to that 30 number than to the 11 number we're at this year.
Is it going to be only 11 million?
We don't want to say only because we're grateful, but yes, 11 million.
So that's, again, how much is being let this year compared to last year with $30 million. And that was because of the incredible increase in the number of carjackings. But more from the Secretary of State, Alexi Giannoulias, yesterday about other types of strategies and tactics that could be implemented here to go up against the carjacking threat, including lawsuits.
We want to be very careful because there are lawsuits going on. There are certain vehicles that are stolen more than others. That's not an opinion. Those are facts. Car manufacturers are invested in making sure it's more and more difficult for vehicles to be stolen. We've worked with some car companies in the Secretary of State's office that do an outstanding job, some that are catching up. There are lawsuits pending in Illinois and across the country. I hope they get resolved, but they absolutely have a vested interest, as do the insurance companies, the car insurance companies in Illinois and throughout the country, which is why I think we have 1 or 2 members on the board.
So again, a board helping oversee all of this, and something that the Secretary of State's highlighting yesterday about more tax dollars. And I mean, they're dollars from a insurance broker per policy. They have to pay $1 on that. I mean, that's essentially a tax, right? So that money going to this fund that's going to be used to help combat carjackings. How your tax dollars are being used. Find more at thecentersquare.com. It is Illinois in Focus daily with the Center Square and America's Talking Network. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for being with us each and every weekday morning. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. All right, make it happen. Crime in Chicago is the focus of a roundtable discussion in Chicago with Mayor Brandon Johnson and Police Superintendent Larry Snelling. It was the People's Plan for Community Safety citywide second quarter meeting, and the mayor and the police superintendent taking a look at a variety of different things and tactics being used to try to address the crime in Chicago. We'll hear some of what those two officials had to say yesterday during this roundtable discussion. But if you go to the Chicago Police Department's website, you'll find the statistics, and I do want to go through some of these statistics with you just to give you a sense of kind of what they're looking at. So these are the CompStat week 25, and it reports a variety of different crimes that are happening. Murder, criminal sexual assault, robbery, aggravated battery, burglary, theft, motor vehicle theft, we talked about in a recent segment with Illinois in Focus daily, and also shooting incidents. And you could see here there's a lot of red marks, which indicates an increase in these crime categories. And there's some green marks as well. More of the short-term types of marks. But for murder, you do have a 4-year average, police are reporting, of a decline of 19%, and that's the 4-year change. The 3-year change, 23%. The 2-year change, 17%, and so on. You can see those numbers. Criminal sexual assault, though, over 4-year change, 23% up. Robbery, up 29% over 4 years. Aggravated battery, up 7% over over 4 years. Burglaries down 17% over 4 years, but the 3-year change is 40%. Theft up 81%, motor vehicle theft up 165%, but shooting incidents reportedly down 18%. So Police Chief Larry Snelling, he talked about some of those numbers and the crime trends that he's seeing and reporting on this yesterday during this roundtable discussion. Here is the Superintendent of Police in Chicago.
We talked about technology. What we've seen is an uptick in robberies over the past 2 years. We're seeing it trend down a little, but not enough. We talk about the homicides being down. We talk about the shootings being down, and they are. Things are trending in the right direction. If we brought it down to one homicide, we could say that's beautiful, it's great, but tell that to the family of the one person who was the victim of the homicide. So what we want to do is focus on everything to make sure that we can maintain a level of peace in this city and bring some safety to you. I am not promising you that this is going to happen overnight. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to solve it overnight. But what I will tell you is myself, Chicago Police Department, will be working their fingers to the bone to make sure that we keep all of our communities safe across the city.
So again, Larry Snelling, the superintendent of Chicago Police, with the mayor yesterday, talking about how to address crime moving forward. We also yesterday, with the segments with Illinois in Focus Daily, talked about the violence intervention grants that is in the state budget. It's $180+ million that's going to be put aside for going to nonprofit agencies or groups like those who go out and try to interdict violence on the streets. But Mayor Johnson yesterday also talked about increased funding in other aspects to try to combat crime in the city of Chicago.
When we have our budget process, I need all of you in this room to participate with a level of aggressiveness that matches the moment of urgency. There are forces who refuse to accept the fact that in order for us to transform our communities, we have to have fully funded neighborhood schools. We have to ensure that healthcare and mental health care is available for our people. We have to build more affordable housing. We have to make sure that our young people have real opportunity to thrive and grow.
And some of that includes the $180+ million for youth summertime jobs. So the state budget, state tax dollars going to go to Chicago with these strategies that they say will be implementing to help alleviate the crime. But what's interesting also is where other resources may be better spent. A report from WirePoint talks about if you're shot, robbed, or assaulted in Chicago, there's a 50-50 chance there'll be no police to respond to your 911 call. This is from Ted Dabrowski and John Klinger and Nick Benatti. In Chicago in 2023, more than 1,800 calls were made to 911. Of a person being shot, only about 800, fewer than half, were responded to immediately by police officers. The other 1,000 callers were victims of 911 backlogs where no police were available at the time of the call. Those victims had to wait half an hour, or even several hours for the 911 call backlog to end and for police to finally arrive. So maybe, that's an area where more money could be spent or just on law enforcement officers as well. Snelling, the superintendent of police, he also talked about outreach and getting out into the community to better interact with those being impacted by violent crime.
We're working closely, especially even in this community now, especially with the conflict that's going on over here right now, with our outreach partners. It's extremely important to understand what they're dealing with and what they're going through stepping out here. Just like police officers' lives are in danger every single day, when we have people who step up and they want to intervene and they want to bring down some of the violence that's going on in this neighborhood, especially as it's related to gangs, these individuals are also putting their lives on the line, as we've seen. And I can tell you this right now. So when you're standing up for your community, it's dangerous. It really is. It's dangerous to stand up for your community at times.
And Snelling also talking about the condition that police officers in Chicago are going through when they get out there and try to address criminal activity and behavior, saying that police officers are humans too.
What you may not know is when our officers are dealing with wide-scale protests, they're dealing with a lot of verbal abuse. In some cases, sometimes physical abuse, things being thrown at them, things of that nature. And we have to make sure that our officers are well rested, properly hydrated, that they're eating. Because if we have an officer out there who's dehydrated, fatigued, malnourished, we know that cognitively that officer may not be there 100%. And what we have to understand, and I've said this a million times, these officers are human beings who will have a human reaction like any other human being if they're not trained to do the work that they're doing.
So Snelling talking about humans being human beings, and police officers are human. But some of the other efforts underway with Chicago police during this roundtable discussion yesterday alongside Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. It's the People's Plan from the mayor's office for community safety.
We talked about technology.
He talks about the efforts of targeting certain types of crimes.
We will be looking at those locations where we're seeing the most crime and the most violent crime. We will be focused on that. We're building better cases. So when we have people who we know are very violent repeat offenders, we will be trying to get those people off the street as soon as possible, and we will try to keep them off of the streets. Because we know that when we have someone out there who's causing harm to families, that could lead to retaliation, and the crime is just ongoing. So with the overall approach, I think we're going to have a more effective way of getting this done.
So clearly, a lot of questions still remain on how exactly law enforcement are going to be impacted by the ongoing crime, but also how they're going to interact with large gatherings.
And listen, we want to make sure that we don't go overboard when we're handling young people. We know that in most cases they're probably following something on social media, and we do want to be careful, but we do want to make sure that they understand that we're not going to tolerate violence. We're not going to tolerate vandalism. We're not going to tolerate them going into neighborhoods and destroying things. So as soon as we see crimes being committed, we're on top of it immediately, and we're not going to allow that to continue. If we can divert them to some other location where they can do something more productive, we'll do that.
So some of the tactics, some of the conversation from yesterday's summit of sorts with Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson and Police Superintendent Larry Snelling. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Go to America's Talking Network on YouTube and find that and more news clips, stories from across the country, not just Illinois. But you can find video segments as well. Again, America's Talking Network, part of the Center Square as we continue to grow and expand, and I greatly appreciate you being part of that. So like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and read up at thecentersquare.com. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. So you were able to watch this with Bishop on air. But again, I got to tell you guys, at a date certain, I don't know when exactly. Could be next week. It could be the week after that. Maybe right before the Republican National Convention. I don't know. But you need to go over and like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell with America's Talking Network. 300 plus of you have already liked, subscribed, and hit that notification bell. get more of you over there, because we'll still do Bishop on Air stuff here and there, but that weekday morning live program, it's going to be Illinois in Focus daily. Why? Because that's what the focus is. So America's Talking Network, where that's going to be made. Get over there, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and make it happen. I want to give a shout out to those in the chat room this morning live, sticking around to the very end here. Nakuda, Tenebris, Stinky Skunk, AJ, JL, Trevor, Tattooed Squirrel, Keith, Donnie C, Robert. Who else we got in here? John, Dorby76, Randall, Guns and Silver, Roseanne, and more. Patriot Paul. Some of you have been around for quite some time, so thumbs up. NT2 Hillbilly? Is that what that is? Oh. David, Brian, Captain Mike, Jay, Doobie Lou. Appreciate you guys. All right, I got to get out of here. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of the day. We'll be back at it tomorrow with another edition of Illinois in Focus Daily. All right, see you then.
Cold.